Okay, now this lesson that I have for you today is one that we all need. That's all I can say, is because when you talk about this kind of a subject, you kind of have to go, okay, the topic we're going to talk about is arrogance, and I'll define what arrogance is, but I have a little short story to tell you beforehand to tell you how arrogant I can be. Okay? When I was, you ready for this?
No.
I want to see everybody's eyes, because this is cool. When I was 4 years old, 4, I thought I was a superhero.
Which one?
I thought I was Superman. Okay? And I had all the Superman stuff that went with it. And so one day I decided, because I was Superman, that I could fly.
Has Superman really been like that long? Like he's been that long?
William, Superman's been around longer than I've been alive. Okay? There you go. If that gives you an indication.
William, remember earlier we learned a time to speak and a time to be silent?
That was not the time to speak.
No, not that kind of stuff.
So, when I was 4, I decided that I could fly. And I thought, well, I need to practice my flying. Okay? Before I go outside and I start flying in the sky, I need to practice my flying in my bedroom. Do you see where this story's going? Okay. Now, so here I am. And at that time, my brother and I shared the same room together, and we had what we call bunk beds, which means there's a bed here and a bed on top. Guess which bed I had?
The top.
The top one, of course. The youngest always gets the top bed. So one day, I decided, well, yeah, I'm going to practice my flying in the bedroom. So I'll climb up to the top, and then I'll jump and I'll start flying.
Oh no.
Okay?
How long
I
did that
got
work
all
out?
ready, so I had my little Superman cape on, which was a towel at the time. You know, and I got ready, and I started, and I jumped, and I landed into the window. The window had, at that time, blinds like this, but they were not plastic, they were metal. And it slashed from here all the way down. So you could tell that there was blood everywhere. Needless to say, I didn't fly. I wound up in the hospital. I wound up with 25 stitches in the back of my head. And because of that arrogance, I have a bald spot there. And that's why. Because I decided at the ripe old age of 4 that I was going to be Superman and I could fly.
Why don't you like practice in like the yard?
You can't practice on the ground. You've got to get high and jump.
Why didn't you jump off your house then?
Maybe you can bring something to the yard. I mean.
No, this doesn't happen that way.
Why didn't you jump off the house?
Because arrogance is a problem. Do you see what happens sometimes when people are arrogant? Bad things happen. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about this. What is arrogance? You ready for this wonderful definition? Bingo! I looked it up in the dictionary. Arrogance is an insulting way of thinking or behaving that comes from believing that you are better, smarter, or more important than other people. That's what arrogance is. When you think you are better, or you are smarter, or you are more important than other people, you're becoming arrogant. Another little short story I'd like to tell you about being arrogant is arrogant will hit at any time and you never know when it hits. This week, I am doing my job at the theater, you know. Now, I will tell you that earlier in my life, did a lot of plays. I did some plays in Chicago. I did some in Little Rock. I was a professional actor. I got to be a professional dancer. I got to do a lot of professional things. And a lot of people my age know me for all my theater stuff. And they say, okay, when are you going to perform again? And everything like that. I was going, man, that just feels so good. You know, it's like this. And I'm welcoming these people, and all these teachers that know that I did theater say, oh, you need to get up here, you need to do this. And all of a sudden one kid goes, who are you? And I went, well, my name's Dennis Foster. He says, so? I was defeated. It can happen. Arrogance can happen at any time. Anytime you think you are smarter, or you're better, or you're more important, that's arrogance. And this is an extremely hard thing to deal with. Okay? It's extremely hard. Arrogance, and I love this, and I really thought about this week. Arrogance is in direct opposition to God's plan for you. When you think you are smarter and you're better and you don't need God to help you, that's a problem.
Amen.
And I think about this a lot, and I tell you, and I told Vicki this morning, this lesson is really for me, even though I'm going to teach it to you. I taught it to myself all week, and I did this. Danny, you want me to slide you again? See, last time I did it, you didn't come back for a few months, so I won't do that. I won't do that. But arrogance is one of those things that is in direct opposition, because anytime you think you are smarter than God, you better look out, because something's going to happen. And when sometimes you think you are more important than God, you better watch out, because God doesn't like that. Arrogance eventually destroys the person. And today we're going to talk about how arrogance really destroyed the life of a man. Arrogance is one of those things that if you don't watch out, that slope, once you start going down, is hard to get out of. Because remember, all throughout this lesson, if I haven't taught you anything else today, I want you to think arrogance is when you think you're better, smarter, or more important. Because that will come back to cause you specific problems. So, in this case, sometimes we are arrogant because we're afraid of what other people might say about us. Do you know those type of people? Some people are afraid what other people might say, so they do exactly what the other people say. For example, I'm going to ask you this question, and I want you to vote. Okay? Yes or no. Okay? Are you ready? According to you, I am going to go eat at Venetia's for lunch. Vote yes if you think I need to go eat at Venetia's for lunch. If you don't think I need to eat at Venetia's for lunch, raise your hand. Oh, y'all said I didn't need to, so I won't go.
What?
It is the Italian restaurant that you like to eat the garlic bread at.
Oh!
Let's try another one. How many of you think I need to take all of you to Mulan's for lunch? Raise your hand, and I'll pay for it. Okay, how many of you don't think I need to take you to Mulan's for lunch? Guess what? Y'all won. So according to y'all, I am taking all of you to Mulan's for lunch.
That's sad.
Do you see how that could be a problem? Number one, I didn't bring my checkbook. Number two, I didn't bring my credit card. And number three, I don't have enough money to pay for all of y'all to eat. Do you see how that could be a problem? There are people out there that are afraid of what you tell them to do, that they'll do it anyway, because you told them to. So, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a decent man who degenerates. I love that word. I am teaching you big words today. You ready? I looked in the dictionary for the longest words I could find, and I found them today. Okay? A decent man degenerates into destruction. A decent man. Now, if you look at your definition, I didn't put it up. I did put it. To change to a state that's worse. So in other words, a decent man becomes what? Indecent or bad. Okay? A good man becomes bad. Man falls into unrestrained patterns of failure. Okay? This is some way that we are afraid. For example, I know, and I'm going to embarrass Calvin, I know Calvin likes to go online shopping. Okay? He likes to go online shopping. Let's just say we all go with Calvin and we're looking at the computer and we tell Calvin to buy this and this and this and this and this and this because we think he needs to buy this and this and this and this and this. Guess what happens if he continues buying this and this and this because we tell him?
He runs out of money.
He goes broke. And then when you're broke, guess what, Calvin?
You're having more friends.
Can't shop anymore. You can't shop anymore.
No, I can do a shopping.
No, not if you don't have money. You don't have money. And then all of a sudden, you know what happens, Calvin? Because you're not listening to us and you're not buying what we tell you to buy, we're not your friends anymore. That's what happens. And sometimes that occurs. Paul's personal, I'm sorry, not Paul, I'm talking about Paul this morning. Saul's personal downfall was absolute evil. Now, I wish they would make a movie on what we're going to talk about today because we really see a decent man turn very evil. And it's easy when you are arrogant. Now, what does arrogant mean?
When you think you're better,
When you think you're better, smarter, or more important.
Or ugly.
The Bible says that we are supposed to taste and see that the Lord is good. That's from Psalm 34. We are supposed to taste and see that the Lord is good. However, 1 Samuel 15 alters that from taste and see that the Lord is good to taste and spit out what unrestrained sin can do for you. Unrestrained means you can't stop. So we're going to look at 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter. So go ahead and turn your Bibles to page 464 in the Old Testament. 464. It sure helps when I take this home with me. 1 Samuel 15. 1 Samuel 15. And I'm going, and Alan and Jeremy tell me I might need to do some explaining. And I'll do some explaining today about something that occurs all throughout the Old Testament. So we're going to look at 4 things. You ready? We're going to look at 4 points of complete arrogance. And this is found in chapter 15. 4 things that Saul. Excuse me, I taught a whole lesson on Paul about an hour ago, so I'm still stuck on Paul. So Saul. First of all, he had a command. And let's look at 1 Samuel 15, verses 2 and 3. You want to read that? Yeah.
Okay.
1 Samuel 15, 2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Verse 2 and 3.
万军之耶和华如此说：以色列人出埃及的时候，在路上亚玛力人怎样待他们，怎样抵挡他们，我都没忘。现在你要去击打亚玛力人，灭尽他们所有的，不可怜惜他们，将男女孩童吃奶的，并牛羊骆驼和驴进行杀。
What?
Sorry.
No problem. So what was the command that Saul was supposed to do? Go kill everything. Go kill everything. Does anybody have a problem with God telling somebody to go kill everything?
Yeah.
Yes.
Some people do, don't they? So let me explain it to you. Okay? This is the reason why God in the Old Testament would tell people to go kill something else. He doesn't do it just for fun. He doesn't decide, oh, I just need to do away with all of y'all, so I'm just going to kill y'all for fun. Yeah. He doesn't do it that way. There's a reason. And that reason comes from, and you don't turn here, but I'll turn there to read it to you. In Exodus 17 and 14, something happened to cause God to be extremely angry. Okay? Now, this is the paraphrase of what happened. The nation of Israel was in Egypt. Okay?
As slaves.
As slaves. The Red Sea. Moses in the Red Sea. They're over the Red Sea. They're wandering. Okay? Now, mind you, if there's 12 million people wandering, are you going to have some people in the back?
Yeah.
Okay? There are some people in the back. So here are all these people, they're wandering through the wilderness. The last part of the people, there's a nation going, let's go kill for fun.
They're probably the slowest, the oldest, the weakest.
The slowest, the oldest, and the weakest were way back in the back. And so this nation came and they killed a bunch of Israelites. Now, one thing you have to understand, you don't mess with God's nation of Israel. If you mess with God's nation, you are going to have to suffer the consequences. Because this nation came and killed all of those people in the back. Remember, there's 12 million of them at least. Because there were 12 million and there's got to be somebody at the back, and this nation kills them all. God says, I want you at the appointed time to come back as a nation, and I want you to do away with that nation that attacked you.
Justice.
Because this nation, you ready for this? For fun and part of their nation, they like to sacrifice children. And they would throw them in the fire. They would throw them off the cliff. They would worship these idols. They would do some things that were so contrary to God. That's evil, isn't it? And God said at the point in time, I want you to do away with that nation because they came and attacked me. Guess who they were? Look at your verse. Verse 2 of 15. Who were these people? Who were these people? 1 Samuel 15:2 says they were the Amalekites. So the Amalekites were the nation that came and attacked Israel. And God says, now you are in a good place. Now it's time for you to get rid of that nation for what they did to me. God never tells the nation of Israel to kill anybody unless they have done it to them first. So that's what you need to understand. Throughout the Old Testament, when God comes down and says, I want you to go do away with this nation, or I want you to do away with that nation, or something like that, it's because they are evil and they are trying to destroy God's people. Does that make sense? So whenever I talk, and we're going to talk about a lot of death, okay? But throughout this whole study of David, you're going to see where God's going to come down and tell them, you need to get rid of this nation. The only reason why they're getting rid of that nation is because they have attacked the nation of Israel and they want to destroy God's people. Okay? So that's why in Exodus 17:21, God has told them to go attack and destroy the Amalekites because of what they did. So now you can understand that's why God told Saul to do this. God's command to Saul was to attack and destroy the Amalekites. because the Amalekites attacked and attempted a total destruction of the Israelites. Now I will tell you this, when the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, don't you think it'd be hard to kill 12 million? That's a lot of people. Okay? 12 million would right now be 6 Arkansas. That's a lot of people. Okay? But these Amalekites wanted the total destruction. So the command was to go and attack. He said, God promised those who attack these people will suffer persecution. So what was the command that God told Saul to do?
Attack the Amalekites.
Attack the Amalekites, right? Okay, so here's where the conflict occurs. Let's look at 1 Samuel 15, verse 4, and 15, verse 8 and 9. So let's look at 1 Samuel 15, verse 4, and then verse 8 and 9.
于是扫罗召聚百姓在举拉因数点他们，共有步兵20万，另有犹大人1万。
And then verse 8 and 9.
生擒的亚玛利王亚甲用刀杀尽亚玛利的众民，扫罗和百姓却怜惜亚甲，也爱惜上好的牛羊、牛犊、羊羔，并一切美物，不肯灭绝，凡下贱瘦弱的，尽都杀了。
Okay, so what's the problem here with Saul? He didn't kill everybody. In fact, what did he do?
He left the king.
He left the king
Best.
and all of the best of everything. Now, is that in complete disobedience to what God told Saul to do?
Yes.
Yes, and so this is what you have to understand. When God tells you to do something and you don't do it all the way that God told you to do, partial obedience is disobedience. When God instructs you to do something and you don't do it completely, you've disobeyed what God wanted you to do. Saul placed, and this is the thing about it is, and really think about this for a second. Calvin, next time you buy something online for clothes, you cannot buy anything that contains the color blue. Okay, I walk away. Calvin goes online and he sees a pair of shoes that are blue. He buys them. Did he obey me or disobey me? He disobeyed. Because he says, I know better than what James says. I really like those shoes. Saul said, here we have a nation of Amalekites. Wouldn't it be cool if I kept the king alive and kept all the good stuff? When he did that, he placed himself in a position of deciding what God wanted. Do you see that's a conflict? God told him to do away with it all. Saul goes, oh, but let me keep the king, and let me keep the good, and let me keep that. That's where you get to a conflict. He kept the capital in the king. I wanted to throw that word for you. Capital is another word for all of the goods. All of the good stuff. God did not want him to. God told Saul he needed to destroy everything, but Saul said, I know better than you, God. I'll just pick it. You see where arrogance comes in? Because remember, arrogance is what? When you, smarter, better, or more important. And because of that, he decided, I know what's better. So here we go. Anytime you disobey God, there is going to be someone that's going to go, what'd you do? There's always going to be. And remember from all the lessons we've had before about the life of David, here's Saul, Who's the other person that might come his way and say, what's going on here?
Samuel.
Samuel. Samuel's going to come. Remember, Samuel is the last judge. Saul is the first king. Okay? So let's look at verse 14 and 15 here.
萨母尔说：“我耳中听见有羊和羊叫牛鸣，是从哪里来的呢？”扫罗说：“这是百姓从亚玛利人那里带来的，因为他们爱惜上好的牛羊，要献与耶和华你的神。其余的我们都灭尽。”
I love this. I love this because let me tell you, this reminds me when I was a little kid and I did the Superman thing, you know, and I jumped off and split my head open and I'm on the floor going, ah! Crying on the floor, and my mom comes in, she says, what? What did you do? And I'm there, and she told me this story. She said, and I just laid there with blood coming out of my head saying, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Do you see a problem there? This is the same thing. Samuel comes, and it's always cool because, Anna, here's a good parenting technique. And I know William and Megan, once I tell them that, they will go, uh-oh, she knows. William's done something wrong, okay? You come in and you look, and William goes, I didn't do it, she did it.
What?
See? When they do that, you know they're guilty. What I left out was verse 13. Samuel walks up to Saul, and look at what Saul says to Samuel in verse 13. The Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions. You know something's up. If you're coming up to somebody and saying, I've done what God wanted me to do. I've done God. And you know what? Oops, let me go. Samuel asked Saul, well, if you obey God, then why I'm hearing noises? And in fact, I'm hearing a lot of sheep sounds.
Uh-oh.
It is hard to partially obey God and keep what God told you not to, because somebody's going to hear it. And Samuel goes, now wait a minute, I am hearing some noises here. In fact, Samuel's instructions were not followed. Remember, he was supposed to go and attack and destroy everything. Samuel comes to Saul and he's hearing sheep sounds. He didn't have sheep before. Now he does. How would you explain it? They just appeared? I don't think so. So Saul's excuses show his relationship with God. Because you have to remember, partial obedience is what in God's eyes? Disobedience. So because Saul did not do the instructions, he disobeyed what God did. So there's the confrontation. So here's the consequence of what occurred. And we have to look at it through these verses. Let's look at verse 23 and verse 28 here.
悖逆的罪与行邪术的罪相等，顽梗的罪与拜虚神和偶像的罪相同。你既厌弃耶和华的命令，耶和华也厌弃你做王。
And verse 28.
撒母耳对他说：“如此，今日耶和华使以色列国与你断绝，将这国赐予比你更好的人。”
Look at what happens here. Samuel says, guess what? Because of your actions, God rejects you as the king. On top of that, God is rejected and He's already preparing someone else to take your place. Through all of these 3 lessons before, it was building up so next week we can see who God chose to replace Saul. Because Saul did things to cause God to reject him. And that word divination, you ready for this? Ouija boards. Witchcraft. He's saying, you're no better than people like this. You were trying to pursue another god. You thought it was more important to do this and this and this. You thought you could keep the king. You thought you could keep the best of everything and God would not know. You're trying to serve another god. You're not trying to serve the one true God. And because of that, then, he was worshiping himself. In fact, if you look earlier in the 15th chapter of 1 Samuel,